This is going to be a very short audio clip, and I want you to envision a stick. It can be a wooden stick or an iron stick, just a stick. A stick in your hand. Of course, it has the cylinder side of it, and it has two ends. That's why it's a stick, it has two ends. It doesn't matter how you turn it vertically or horizontally, it still has two ends. Even if you break it in two pieces, now you have two sticks. You have two objects with two ends. Okay? So let's say you have one stick, and you have one side named pain and the other side named pleasure. At the side of pleasure, you have yes. At the side of pain, you have no. At the side of no, you also have dislike, and at the side of pleasure, you have like. Let's say now someone has this stick. He or she, let's say she goes around. And the side that's written yes, together with like, together with pleasure, she points that side to her, and the other side with pain, no, and dislike is pointed towards others or towards the environment. And what happens now is she is poking and beating others with that other side of the stick, where the no side of the stick. So let's say she goes around and she does this. People are going to notice, hold on a minute, we need to institutionalize this woman. This woman is not right in her mind. But imagine now you have a group of people, let me say 1,000 people or even 1,000,000 people, who are basically they are doing the same thing. Instead, they now have a smaller group. Let's say you have a group of 1,000,000 and you have a group of 20,000, and the group of 1,000,000, they are using their sticks with the no side, where also pain and the dislike is written on, and they're beating the group of 20,000. Now, when you see something like, of course, you won't see something like this happen. This is just an illustration I'm giving to you. But I'm using illustration to point out something to you. That stick, it has two ends. Whenever you are involved with that stick, you have both the pain and the pleasure. You have both the no and the yes, both the like and the dislike, both the comfort and discomfort. You cannot have one side of the stick without the other. You can't have one end of the stick without the other end. But here's the catch. What if you are deceived into thinking that one stick has only one end instead of two? Logically, this is not possible. But let's say in your mind there is this duality going on, that you say, well, pain and pleasure, yes and no, they're two different opposite things, while they're both part of the same stick. Now, you may imagine that the stick only has one end, but it's only your imagination. It's only an illusion. So you may be enjoying the north side of the stick, but after a while, but at the same time, you have to hold the south side of the stick in order to benefit from the north side. You get where this is going? I've spoken about the self, how the self is a fiction based on denied pain. Well, that's really what it is. By denying pain, you're aiming towards pleasure. But the only reason why you're aiming towards pleasure, the only reason why you've made this imaginary boundary to keep pain out, is because you are seeing things separate. You have a mindset of rejection. So rejection is not something you just feel when you're denied something. Rejection is a part of who you are. I mean, it's a part of the self. And the only way to avoid this becoming obvious and to experience the rejection that's part of your way of thinking, it's by having validation for the yes side of the stick. And that's why people join groups. That's why they join cults. But the thing is, the no side of the stick will always go with them wherever they are. And you know, guys, that's what duality is all about. It's about an insistence upon a separation that ain't there. You have joy and you have pleasure versus pain. But pleasure and pain are two sides of the same coin. But we don't see it that way. And that's where the self begins. The self begins when there is this one-side boundary to avoid emotional pain and to redirect emotional pain. That's where the self begins. That's where personalities are developed. And that's where also, that's also the origin of selfishness. Persisting upon a separation that ain't there. To exploit what you perceive as comfort, which is pleasure, which is the yes, and which is the likes. So the self is unreal. It's not non-existent, it's unreal. So that means that everything the self does will be unreal also. That doesn't mean that what the self is doing, that the consequences are non-existent, but what they are doing is unreal. So the self is therefore addicted at achieving the yes, is addicted at chewing at the yes side of the stick. And by keep chewing on the stick, he or she will come at the no side sooner or later. This is a trap of the self. And this is a trap of the mental equilibrium. This is the trap that sinners are stuck in. Even as a believer, you will have this urge towards duality. There's a residue of the old man. Yes, you became born again, you are a new creature, but inside your body there's still this residue of the old man. And this will also affect your soul. That's why you ought to prosper in your soul by being transformed by the renewing of your mind. When your mind is renewed, you will perceive things the right way. Because listen, when you don't renew your mind, you will be automatically drawn, even as a born again individual, even when you're as a believer, you will be drawn towards a mental equilibrium, towards unconsciousness, which is another way to say towards darkness. Well, that's I wanted to mention in this video to make you alert of it. So, look, what it comes down to is that the self, or let me say, the selfishness, can only operate in exclusion. That's the only way it can exclude. The only thing the self can acknowledge is self. The self cannot acknowledge anything that's not the self. So the self is very small, isolated, and this is the thing. The self can only remain a self if it has copies of itself. If there are many copies in an environment, then the self won't be recognized as the small, limited, and unreal entity it is. Why? Because there are many copies. But it's still a self. It's still unreal. And that's why, for those that are born again, we are commanded to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Because you are supposed to be real, not unreal. Because those that are unreal, eventually, all the denied pain, that's all they're left with. Because the pleasure is fleeting and the emptiness will always show up sooner or later, often sooner. For those that are born again, they have the Spirit of the Most High in them, and they have the life of Christ in them. Still, they ought to renew their minds in order to operate in it. And to renew your mind simply means agreeing with Christ. That being said, you all be blessed.